I'm the president of the Wellfleet Community Forum, and I want to thank you for all being here tonight. Tonight we are having our State of the Town with our administrator, Dan Hort. But before we begin, I would like to make a couple of announcements of upcoming forums. We actually have our schedule for the next couple of months out. And our next one is going to be on March 18th, which is a Monday evening, and that is with the Housing Authority and Local Housing Partnership, and they're going to be talking about the 95 Lawrence Road housing proposal that they would like to share and discuss with you. And I believe that that item is going to be on the warrant, so it would be good for people to be here to have an understanding of it. And then we do have an election, a selectman's election. There are sort of theoretically two open seats. Jerry Houck has announced that he is stepping down, so there is an open selectman's seat, and Janet Reinhardt is running for re-election. And hopefully we will have candidates stepping up, or at least another candidate that we can hear from. And that, with all things going well, our candidates night will be in April, and that is going to be April 10th. It's a Wednesday evening here at the library, and that will be at the library. That will not be here at the senior center. And then on April 16th, here at the senior center on Kings Highway, we're going to have pre-town meeting, and Dan Silverman, who is our moderator, will lead that discussion and go over the items that are then on the warrant. So with that, and with no other further ado, again, I want to thank you. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions from our administrator on how things are going. And I appreciate you all being here. And let me introduce Dan Hort, administrator of Wellfleet. And thank you, Dan.
Good evening, everybody. Just to give you an update on some of the things that are happening. If I don't cover something that's of interest to you, there'll be a time for you to ask questions afterwards, so feel free to ask questions. The FY20 budget was presented to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee in December. The budget since then has been adjusted up and down since we have found new information. When we first do the budget, we don't have information from the schools. We don't usually have health insurance information or retirement assessment and things like that. So as that comes in, we have a tendency to need to adjust the budget from time to time. A couple of items of note on the budget. The Wellfleet share of the Nauset Regional School District has increased by 8.6% this year. Now, their budget for the district has increased by 2.5%, but our share of the budget has increased. It increased by almost 1%. It's about 0.75%. Our share of the budget increased while the other three towns in the district either stayed flat or decreased. So it all is co-connected sort of, and depends on how many students each town sends in to the district. So this year we've got more students, an increase in students rather than the other towns which have fewer students. It's a two-edged sword. I kind of look at that as great news. Yes. We've got more kids going to the school. That's good news. So I'm going to stay with that. So, health insurance is usually an area where I sit here with a sad face. I give you bad news. I tell you I have no control over health insurance each year. This year I can tell you that the rates from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group were just received a couple of weeks ago. The increase this year is 0%. The rates have stayed the same from FY19 to FY20. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen. So I was budgeting and planning for a 5% increase, and was a little nervous that I was under budgeting in that amount. And when they came back and said 0, it was like a really great surprise. So creating a budget is a year-by-year thing. Next year, the health insurance may go up more than we expected it to. The number of students may fluctuate up or down depending on the size of the class that comes to Nauset. So I try to be able to predict that by having a 5-year plan that we can kind of look at and kind of at least get the direction where we're heading. So, but something like health insurance is very difficult to predict. While student population, I've got a grid that comes from the Nauset School District, and they show us everybody who's in the first grade all the way through the 12th grade. So I can tell usually a little bit and get an idea that, okay, the 12th grade class is departing and they have 20 students, and the 5th grade will then join Nauset and they have 25, so that means my student population, all other things being equal, is going to go up by 5. So you can kind of guess a little bit. You obviously can't guess when people move in or out of the district, but it's kind of a way to be able to monitor that. Speaking of the town meeting, tomorrow, if you look on the town's website, you will see that I've posted the town administrator's initial draft of the town meeting warrant. And so this is a draft, hasn't been voted on yet by the selectmen. They will do that on March 4th. But this is of the items that I know that need to be on the warrant. So I'm putting that forward as a draft that committees can see and start to form their recommendations on. The select board will go over that draft at their meeting on March the 4th and decide whether or not to insert articles into the warrant and what their recommendation will be on it. So that'll happen on March the 4th, but if you want a preliminary look and start to get an idea of what's going to be on the warrant, you can look on the town's website tomorrow after I've got it posted. So talk about specific areas that are of interest. I think most of you have probably heard about dredging. While I've been here, I've been through 2 funding cycles. I will tell you, both times I was almost certain we were going to be funded. And it didn't happen. I won't say that the process is hidden, but I also wouldn't say it's very transparent. We think that the Massachusetts office of the Army Corps of Engineers, by all signs and indications, has us at the top of their priority list. From there, it goes to the New York office of the Army Corps of Engineers. Then it goes to the Washington, D.C. office. Then the Office of Management and Budget makes their recommendation. Somewhere from when it leaves Massachusetts to the final Office of Management and Budget recommendation, we have been falling off and not being at the top of the list for funding. And no one will really tell us when or why. So we don't know if it's the Office of Management and Budget that's making the final decision. We've had great support from the community. We sent over 100 letters to the Office of Management and Budget last year. We had all of our congressional representatives send a letter in, but we didn't get the funding, nor do we know why. So we don't know if it's somebody else was a priority this year, next year, Wellfleet, you're gonna get your funding. Or is it we're too blue of a community and too blue of a state and you'll never get your funding until there's a Democratic administration? We don't know any of that. So we've started to look at it from a point of view of worst case scenario, the town of Wellfleet would have to pay for its own dredging. Even though the federal channel is the responsibility of the federal government, if they're not going to get to it in 5 years or whenever, and we don't know when they're going to get to it, all of a sudden we have to start looking at it and saying we can't wait that long. The mayonnaise and the sediment that accumulates in our harbor could smother our shellfish industry and just cause havoc in our harbor. So we're starting to look at it and plan what if we have to do it ourselves. The selectmen are going to form a task force, a committee, an official committee to handle dredging. They will handle both how do we get the harbor dredged and then how do we do maintenance dredging after that. We're going to continue to work on the federal government to try everything we can do to get funding that they come in and do the federal channel. But we also have to be prepared for what if they don't do that. Losing access to the harbor and losing our shellfish industry could be catastrophic to our town. Sure.
I actually did stop by Representative Keating's office.
Oh, can you use the mic?
One of our rules. I happened to stop by, I was in Hyannis a couple of weeks ago, or when this news first came out, and so I was right there, and I said I thought I would drop in, and I was speaking with Andrew, I believe his name is, and He was saying, well, number one, there's not a lot of funding in the Army Corps of Engineers. So say you have $10 million or $10 billion or whatever they have, and we need so much. He said, that, if you have $16 million or $16 billion worth of projects, and you only have 10 in the bank. They have to make these decisions. And what I think the dredging committee should do in talking to him is, we have a lot of elected officials. I know that we have a congressman from Maryland who has a residence here. We have Congressman McGovern, who has a home on the Cape, not necessarily in our town, but the Maryland one is from our town, is in our town. We have Catherine Clark, who has residence in Truro. So we should really start trying to lobby those other out-of-state representatives that may have homes here or visit here quite often, and see what we can do. And also, we have to keep in mind what's going on with this wall. And and even Andrew said if he decides to take, the $5 billion for the wall, that leaves even less in the Army Corps, and we can see what he's threatening with California and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if it's blue. I don't know if it's because we're blue. I don't know if we're big enough to be stuck out as blue. But I do think that we're just in a very bad place. And but I think that there are other people we can start to try to bring in on that are beyond our congressional delegation, that have an affinity and an affection for this place. So I will help you get all those names and see if we can start
Thank you.
having them.
And I would, that type of information, that's news to me. So anybody else who has information like that or suggestions on what might be able to help us get over the hump,
Right.
I would welcome that type of information. So please let me know. So.
I guess I can remind, just very quickly, Catherine Clark did send a letter. Yeah.
So again, it would be good to kind of get a ripple outside of Massachusetts.
Yeah,
Because we're Massachusetts on top of being Wellfleet in Massachusetts.
And I'm not here to criticize Governor Baker, but we asked him for a letter of support, and his office refused to send one on the basis that they didn't want to favor our community over another community. And I tried to explain to him, you're favoring Massachusetts over, say, Louisiana. And if we can get more money to Massachusetts, everybody wins. I have no problem if he sends a letter for every community in Massachusetts, but so I'm hoping that the next time that I can hopefully go to Boston and have a personal meeting with him, just to be able to hopefully talk to him and get him, because I think coming from our Republican governor, I think that could not hurt. So we're going to hopefully have a little bit more pull next time that way. So. One of the new things that many of you have heard about is the room occupancy tax that has been expanded to all short-term rentals. If you rent your home for more than 14 days in the entire year, then you're subject to the short-term rental. There are exemptions to that if it's a year-round rental, or if I believe it's 90 days, if it's more than 90 days that you rent it to one person. Then you're not subject to the short-term rental tax. We have put some information on the town's website so that you can look and see some information there. There's also some links to the state of Massachusetts. They have a frequently asked questions. And hopefully in late March or early April, I'm going to be at the library for a couple of hours on a Saturday morning, just if people have questions about the room occupancy tax. Having been a part owner of a bed and breakfast, I'm familiar with the room occupancy tax from our point of view. So people who haven't handled this before, at least I can answer some questions for them. And if I'm not able to answer their questions, I'm able to help them look it up for them. So.
So this week on Mindy Todd, which is at 9 o'clock in the morning, so you can look on WCAI, you can look at their podcast, and she did have so today is Thursday, it might have been Tuesday, Wendy Northcross, who is the head of the Cape Cod Chamber, gave a talk to try to discuss what this was about and how it was going to affect homeowners. And then Andrew Gottlieb, who really was the, he helped put together this legislation over the last 3 years and is the head of Association to Protect Cape Cod, was also talking about why this is happening and what that money is going to do for Cape Cod. So it's going to feel painful, but we're going to help, and it may even, within another year or two, be building up where we can access money for dredging. So, to assist with that. So it will be a good thing in the end. And I am asking Andy to come here to be a guest of the forum, hopefully in May.
That'd be great.
So that's another piece.
And that part of the tax, in Wellfleet, you would collect 12.45%. 5.7% of that is for the state of Massachusetts and goes directly to the state. It all gets paid to the state, and then the share that belongs to us or to the Cape Cod Water Protection Fund gets distributed back to them. So when anybody is submitting their tax, it all gets paid to the state. But it's 5.7 to the state. You have an option. Communities have an option of between 0 and 6% as a local option tax. In Wellfleet, we have a 4% local option tax. And then there is a 2.75% that is for the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. And that is to help us with our problems with water quality. It's also possible that it could be used for dredging. So there's the potential there that some of this tax will come back to us and we can use it for dredging. There's also the potential of that 4% tax that at some point we may want to say, okay, of that money that comes in, X% of that will go into our dredging maintenance fund. So when we talk about dredging, how can we reduce the financial impact that's going to have on our community? This is one of those ways that could do it. So I'll have an open forum probably in late March, early April. Then I'll stop everything for town meeting. And then probably in sometime early to mid-May, I'll probably have another forum where I'll just be there just to answer questions. And if you're not there, I will sit there and drink coffee and eat donuts. So I'll be okay even if you don't come in, but it's a chance for people who maybe don't live here year-round to be able to also come in and ask questions as well. Another thing that has come up recently is the Cape Cod Rail Trail extension. It's become more contentious than I expected it to be. I thought, wow, extending a bike trail, how could anybody be upset with that? Little naive there. So I've seen the objections of people who said that this is just going to dump people out onto Route 6. And that's not the intent of the extension of the Cape Cod Rail Trail. The extension is basically going to end at Route 6. So there will be a parking lot there where the Cape Cod Rail Trail ends. So when you get to the end of the rail trail, you can either take your bike and put it back on your car and head home or wherever you're going, or you turn around and go back to where you started out from. So the intent is not to dump people onto Route 6 and say, okay, Cape Cod Rail Trail is continuing. Having said that, one of the questions that came up, because we're also, as you know, looking at the Route 6 and Main Street intersection and redesigning that. So I asked the people who were designing that intersection, who are also helping with the design for the Department of DCR, Conservation and Recreation, the same company is engineering and designing both. And so I said, is there a way for people who do want to continue to Truro, to downtown Wellfleet, to Provincetown, is there a way that we can more safely get them through the Route 6 and Main Street intersection? So they have been able to design where we would have a designated bike path right along Route 6 to get them through the Main Street intersection. I completely understand there are lots of issues with that. If they want to turn left at Main Street and head into downtown Wellfleet, we don't have we don't have the ability to provide a really safe way to people to ride on a lot of our streets because our streets are very narrow. There's also a lot of curb cuts for where the new Cumberland Farms gas station is going to be. But I think overall, I think it's better than just saying go out on Route 6 and you're on your own. So they will be coming to, the people who are talking about the Route 6 and Main Street intersection will be coming to the select board meeting next Tuesday night, the 26th. It is not about the Cape Cod Rail Trail extension. It is how do we safely get people through the Main Street and Route 6 intersection. So for those who have issues for the Cape Cod Rail Trail, I understand that you have issues, but the meeting that we're going to have next Tuesday night and the presentation we're going to have is truly just about how do we get those who do want to ride on Route 6, how do we get them safely through the Route 6 and Main Street intersection. So hopefully we won't spend our whole evening talking about the Cape Cod Rail Trail, so that's not the intent there. So one issue I think we can't skip that we have to talk about is the sharks in our ocean waters. We were all saddened by the fatal attack that happened last September. I think we kind of lost an innocence with that. For as long as I live, I'll remember that day, and I'll remember Arthur Medici, who lost his life. A certain innocence was lost there. Now people are sort of asking, well, what are you going to do about it? There are those who want us to immediately go out and put this system in or this system in. And I will tell you, the first day I was back at work after this happened on a Monday, before I answered any of the calls that I got from a number of newspapers and radio stations and TV stations, I called town council and said, what can I say? What should I say we're doing? Their response, and they said, you may not like what I'm going to tell you, but as a town, you're better off if you do nothing. Because if you do stuff and you start to tell people or give them the impression that they are safer in the water, and they're not, you then become liable for when something happens again. It's not something I wanted to hear, but they made it very clear to me, and I understood exactly what they were saying. If I put in a buoy system or I put in the netting that says you're safer here because we've done that, and it's not effective, and you're attacked by a shark, I've done a disservice to that person who was attacked because they thought they were safe, and I've done a disservice to the town because I put you at a liability risk. So what are we doing about it? There is a shark working group that's been in existence for a number of years, made up by beach administrators, shell fishermen, shellfish constables, harbor masters, all along on Cape Cod and some of the South Shore in Massachusetts. They've been in existence for a number of years and have been responsible for a lot of the education that you see now, where you see a pamphlet, where you see the purple flag that's at the beach warning people of sharks. So they've been in existence and have been working on a lot of those issues. They will continue to work on those issues. After last fall's attack, I had Lieutenant Governor Polito call me, so I now have her cell phone number. So, but when I returned her call, she basically was, what do you need from the state? And we've been in constant contact with them, but I also said, that shark just happened to be in Wellfleet at the time the attack happened. I said, this is really an issue for all of our Outer Cape towns. So the town managers and administrators from Chatham to Provincetown, we've all gotten together and are talking about what we need help with from the state. We hope to meet within the next week or two in Boston with the Massachusetts Department of Public Safety and Security. One of our issues, as you know, is cell phone service at the beach. If somebody was at the beach and they saw a shark, other than just hollering out, they wouldn't be able to tell anybody. They wouldn't be able to notify an app that might notify other swimmers. There's no way to communicate because of the beautiful terrain at our beaches.
I just want to make sure I understand this point, because before I thought that from the parking lot, people could phone. So
Yes.
are you saying just strictly on the beach, phones can't be
Where-
made?
that-
If you can haul yourself up to the parking lot, you can phone perfectly well, can't
Yes.
you? Okay, so we're
Yes.
just talking about walking up the hill.
It depends on what beach. The parking lot at LeCounts, there's no coverage. No, it's very iffy.
So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have reliable cell phone service, both in the parking lot and at the beach level. So if you are on the beach, even if you're a lifeguard on the beach, you have difficulty being able to communicate with our fire and rescue staff.
What I'm trying to ascertain is to what degree we feel ourselves responsible. You know, is it perfect access on the beach, perfect access in the lot? And I can tell you from looking at town records when people were asking even to have a lifeguard at the oceanside, this is as recently as the 40s, their response without any kind of qualm was, we can't afford that, period, end of discussion. It's up to you to take care of yourself on the beach.
If you want to ask more questions about it as soon as I'm done with this segment, because I've got some thoughts that address what you're talking about. So as the group of town administrators and town managers have gotten together, we're prepared to talk to the state to hopefully be able to get funding from the state. It could potentially be something like satellite phones so that our lifeguards at least have access. One of the things that the town of Wellfleet is doing is we are installing landline call boxes at every one of our parking lots. So hopefully we'll have enough of a notification and signage that when you go to the beach, you will see that call box, and you know that if you are on the beach and you can't get any cell phone reception, at a very minimum, you can go to that call box, and that will connect you directly to the fire and rescue department. So that's one of the ways to make people at least know a way that they can communicate. It reminds me of what you had just said is if you go to the Provincetown Airport, you can only get reception if you're standing under the American flag at the airport. And and we may all know the spots at the beach where you can get cell phone reception, but somebody visiting the beach won't know that this beach doesn't have any cell phone reception, but if you go to the parking lot at this beach, you can usually get reception. So we want to make it more reliable for people. The town is also conducting Stop the Bleed training. What in a sense we're doing here is we're saying if a shark attack happens, we want to be very prepared to respond. I'll talk about mitigation in a little bit, but we want to be prepared to respond. So having people who are trained in the Stop the Bleed program could save somebody's life by stopping the blood loss if they've had an interaction with a shark. That training is available to anybody in the public who would like to be involved in it. We'll certainly make sure that our lifeguards are trained in it. Speaking of the lifeguards, what we're doing this year is normally our lifeguards are there until Labor Day. We're extending that there so that they're there through the end of September on the weekends, because that's when most of the people will be there. Now, if it's a rainy day in September and nobody's going to go to the beach, the lifeguards are probably not going to work that day. But we're going to try and have staff out there at least on the weekends through the end of September. And this is something we're going to have to work on over time and see what works and what doesn't work. I told people when they first started interviewing me, I went to school to become an accountant. I don't know anything about sharks. And this is all something that I've got to learn, and so many of us have to learn about how we react and how we can make people safer. Our beaches are spectacular, but they also create problems. If somebody is injured on the beach, and that could be from any reason, whether it's a shark attack or it's just somebody had a medical emergency, right now you have to carry that person up the dune. So we are going to bring to town meeting, we're going to bring an article that will allow us to purchase a small vehicle that will hold a stretcher so that you're able to put that person on the stretcher and bring them up the dune to where the rescue vehicle would be waiting for you. So we're looking at how we react to a shark attack. So We'll continue to work on education for our residents, our visitors. I think I'm most concerned about our visitors because I think our residents are pretty aware of everything, but our visitors who come here may not be, and we need to focus on education for them and make sure that they know the risk of what they're doing. They know how to reduce the chance of an interaction with a shark. And even knowing some of that, you know, Mr. Medici did a couple of things that probably he shouldn't have, it wasn't his fault, I don't want to say that in any way, but he was an area of the water which was probably a little bit more dangerous than if he had been in a different area. But they also say don't swim at dusk and at dawn. He wasn't doing that. He was, you know, he wasn't swimming at dusk or at dawn, but he still lost his life out there boogie boarding. So he did a lot of things right. There were a couple of things, you know, if hindsight's 20/20, but if he, you know, had been in a different area, maybe he'd still be with us today. So we just want to make sure we educate people about that. You probably have heard there are people who say the town hasn't done enough about the towns on the Cape, that the next time there's a shark attack, we'll have blood on our hands, and that we're not moving fast enough. I completely understand that. I think it's somewhat simplified to be able to sit at your computer and type that up without knowing all of the facts. I prefer people who are part of the solution rather than just to sit at their computer and throw stones. And the facts are that I can't go to town meeting and ask for $1 million for a shark mitigation strategy unless I know that it's going to be at least somewhat effective. So the group of the Outer Cape towns, the Seashore and the National Shark Conservancy have hired Woods Hole Group to do a study of the various we never call them solutions, of the various options that are out there for shark mitigation. They won't have that until after the summer season this year. I know people would like to see it out there right now, but I can't in good conscience put it out there right now unless I know it's going to work. And I completely understand the people who would like to see us do something now. If I'm talking about, say, product A in regards to shark mitigation, and the inventor tells us it's 40% effective. Well, the person who goes out into water is saying, well, at least I'm 40% safer than I was before this. As a town administrator, I look at it and say, you're only 40% safer. There's still a 60% chance that this will have no effect whatsoever. And it then comes into the issue of a liability issue of, are we putting ourselves at a liability risk? It's the world we live in now, but are we putting ourselves in a liability risk because we put something out there and inferred or gave the impression that it was going to be safer? We have to really be careful when we do this. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to make somebody 100% safe. People always have to know that there's a risk. The Atlantic Ocean is the home of seals. It's the home of sharks. And if you're in their habitat, there's always a chance anywhere up and down the East Coast, not just in Cape Cod, there's a chance anywhere up and down the East Coast that you could have an encounter with a shark, and you just kind of have to be aware of that. So I changed my talk around a little bit when I wrote it up because I didn't want to end with a shark talk. I thought that's a little too depressing. So we've continued. Yes?
Can I ask a question about
Sure. Can you use the microphone, please? Yep.
This is just a simple thing. The summer daylight is much longer, obviously, than the winter daylight, and the lifeguards usually at 5 o'clock go home. And in the summer, a lot of our guests are at the beach till 6 or 7.
Yep.
And obviously, you don't want anyone to be in the water at dusk, but 5 o'clock is not dusk in the summer. Is it possible to extend the lifeguards to, say, 6 in the summer at the beach?
I think that's possible, and Suzanne Grout-Thomas, our beach administrator, has talked about doing that, and extending the time that they're there at the beach and extending the season that they're there, because it's it's a different world now. It's not just we're there and after 5 o'clock you're swim at your own risk. It's like we know that there are dangers out there that if there isn't a lifeguard there, there's nobody to contact and say, how can you help me? Something like that. So we realize the importance of our lifeguards. One of the issues that we do have with lifeguards is the ability to hire them. I think we have the funding that we can do it, but we have lifeguards who maybe come and work for us during the day, and then they work in a restaurant at night. And so it's the scheduling part that becomes somewhat of the issue. The fall, we're hoping to extend it, but we know there's going to be problems there because so many of our lifeguards are involved in school. They're either students or they're teachers, and they need to get back to their jobs or their classes. So we're trying to address it. I agree with exactly what you said. We're trying to address it, and we just have to work out the logistics to it. So we have tried to increase transparency in your local government. We post the select board meeting notices on Facebook. Facebook, as you all know, is a two-edged sword, so I try not to get involved in conversations on Facebook because you can get dragged into almost anything on Facebook. So you learn your lesson every now and then when you get caught on that. We've also started to see an increase in the number of committee meetings that are taped. Parking Task Force is being taped every time they meet now. The Finance Committee is being taped. And we're continuing to try and encourage committees, not to force them, but encourage them to have their meetings taped so that people can be at home and still watch what's going on in their local government. So if you're seeing meetings and you're liking that they're being taped, we encourage you to ask other committees to consider having their meetings taped as well. We would like to get as many of them as we can on TV so that you don't have to go to every meeting, you can actually watch them at home. So we're making progress there, but we've got a ways to go. So this year I also started sending out a monthly newsletter. We're up now to 400 subscribers. The newsletter usually recaps what the select board meetings are. We're starting to do updates from committees. So if a committee has an update that they'd like the general public to know about, we put that out there for them. So what we're trying to, if you're interested in government but you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, we're trying to make it really easy for you so that if you want to know what the select board we're talking about, you can go to this, see a summary of what they're talking about, and then if you want to find out more information, you can actually go and watch the tape or you can read the minutes. But we're just trying to make this kind of a summary that's more user-friendly and keep people involved. We've had people who go away for the wintertime who say, well, why were you doing this, hidden from us in the wintertime? And the government continues to move on, even in the wintertime. So this is just hopefully trying to make them more aware of what's going on in the town. So one of the exciting items you will see on the warrant for town meeting this year, and Sheila referenced it about an upcoming forum, is the commitment to use the property on Lawrence Road across from the school for housing. It is one of, if not the largest parcel of land that would be available from the town to be able to use for housing. So that parcel is about 9 acres, just a little over 9 acres. They're looking at possibly maybe using 5 acres of it for housing. It would be rental housing. So the people who can't afford a home here and are forced out of town because they can't afford to buy a home here would be able to rent a home. We're hoping to see that maybe some of our firefighters would be able to rent an apartment here. Some of our policemen, some of our school teachers. We hope that maybe eventually we'll see some families want to rent an apartment here until they get on their feet and they can buy something, or maybe they just want to stay and rent it. But I think this property has the opportunity, the chance to really change our community in a very positive way, in that when we look around and we see so many people who aren't here during the wintertime, increasing it so that we've got, maybe 30 or 40 units there of people who are living here and living here year round, who go out to dinner, who go and spend money in the stores. It just really can keep our community thriving and an alive community. So I think keep on watching for this, keep on listening to information on this. I think it has a real opportunity to be really a positive impact on our community. And so I'm really excited to watch it come forward. We're working out all of the logistics. Obviously, as you know, there's a ball field there. We're not trying to take away the ball field. We also have the water towers on this land, so we're not trying to do anything that disturbs where the water tower is. But there's a good portion of land there that is on flat land, and it has access to town water that really has the potential to be a life-changing opportunity for the town. And if you get to talk to people from the Housing Authority, they're very enthusiastic about it, and it's a chance of a lifetime, I think, to be able to do something like this for our community. So it's pretty exciting. So. And that is all I have. So if you have questions you'd like to ask, I'm certainly, yes. And please use the microphone so that people at home can hear it too. So.
I have a question about the rental tax. I rent my house and I voted for the rental tax. And my question is the town going to monitor the people that are renting, like through the beach sticker or what, to make sure that everybody is paying?
It is my intent. So I know in Provincetown, after I left, they hired a compliance officer to make sure that people were complying with their various, you have to register your rental and pay a small fee every 3 years, and had a compliance officer that made sure that people would do that. My intent is to look at this, and if we see that we don't think that people are complying, what we would probably do is hire somebody part-time, maybe during the summer, who would go through the Airbnb ads or Craigslist and look for properties that were listed and then match them up from the list that we would get from the state of saying, who should be submitting the rental tax.
I think that's important.
I do too, I agree.
Just one quick question and a comment. The question is, do you know yet when the selectmen are going to close the warrant? Because I get now and then somebody will call me and ask, what's the procedure for submitting a petitioned article? What are the time frames involved in that?
I don't have my calendar with me. You can look it up online under the Selectmen's page. There is a schedule for the FY20 budget and 2019 annual town meeting. I know the last day for petitioned articles to be submitted is the last day of February. They have to be submitted prior to March 1st, according to our charter.
Okay.
The selectmen are going to hopefully do all of the hard work on Monday, March 4th, where they have everything ready. If everything's finalized, they could be closing the warrant at their meeting on the 12th. But anybody who wants to do a petitioned article should have it in February.
Okay, that's basically what I was asking for. Thank you.
Hi, Dan. Thank you.
David.
David Agger, Wellfleet. 2 quick questions. Going back to the dredging, if the town of Wellfleet decided to go ahead and just pay for it to get a loan or whatever and pay for it themselves, is that a plus or is that a negative in terms of continuing to apply for the federal funding? As in, would they say, "Oh, look, they're doing it in kind, so we're gonna give them money, or we'll reimburse them, or we can use that money to pay back the loan"?
I'm pretty sure it sounds weird to say it this way, but it would be a negative. If we pay for it out of our own pocket, they're not going to reimburse us for it. They're not going to give the money afterwards. The state, when we're doing the rest of the harbor, the state may be willing to do like a matching grant where you pay 50% and we'll reimburse you for the other 50%. But the federal government, if we go ahead and do it on our own, is not going to come back and reimburse us.
Right. Thank you. And another quick question. Thinking about the summer, say starting June 1st, what's your prediction in terms of recreational and medicinal marijuana stores, and what are your personal and professional thoughts about what this summer's going to look like.
So thank you all for coming. You know what? I will think for the marijuana dispensaries, they have moved so slowly that I'm not really expecting any to be around this year yet. I just think, you know, there's only 2 opened in the state right now. We have 2 we've issued 2 host community agreements. We've got a 3rd in the pipeline, a 4th in the pipeline, and interest from a 5th. But the first one that we did, they're in the pipeline, but they haven't gotten any further with the state. So I'm not confident that the Cannabis Control Commission, who issues the license, I'm not confident that they're going to be this summer. I haven't seen anything that makes me think that this process is moving really fast. They've only got 2, authorized so far, and I don't see any movement where all of a sudden they're starting to issue more. I think they're still working through the system, so I'd be pleasantly surprised if one opened, and I say that only, I realized as I said it, I say that only from the point of view as the town administrator who would welcome the additional revenue. I am not a user myself, so it doesn't matter to me from that point of view, but I just don't see the process moving that quickly, so I don't expect it this year. It is interesting about what's going to happen this summer season. People who are coming and rent houses are going to see that cost be 12% higher, 12.5% higher. I've heard a number of people who have spoken up and said, oh, Wellfleet, that's where the sharks are. I'm going to go here instead. How much of that is talk? How much of that is reality? I don't know. I went to the select board at one point, and knowing that a member of the select board is sitting here in the front row, I'm going to come back to the select board, but I would like to, we've got some money that's sitting in an account that was left over from the Blossoms Fund, and it was left over from the Harborfest Fund. There's probably like $5,000 there. I'd like to see us do something to proactively market Wellfleet, to have somewhat of a PR campaign somehow. However we do that, maybe working with the chamber or working with organizations in town. But I think our brand is a little bit damaged because of the unfortunate accident that happened last fall. We're associated with it. People hear Wellfleet and they think of what happened with Mr. Medici. And we all still think about that, but we also know you can come to Wellfleet and you can have a great time in Wellfleet, and you can go to the beaches, and you can be a little bit more careful and be in the water, and you can really enjoy your time. So we still want people to come and enjoy Wellfleet, but I think maybe we have to work a little bit harder for it. So I'm looking at it from that point of view.
Again, I'm just going to throw out a suggestion. So our Cape Cod Chamber, it goes out and markets all of Cape Cod.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking with Wendy Northcross at one time, and she said that the biggest draw was the National Seashore. And I said, well, cut it out, because there's more people coming down here than ever. But I get that, and I think that that would be a good resource to contact and say, is there a way or a way you can help us market that? We'll do an in-kind match or what have you to help, but they have the tools and they have the whole apparatus to get that out there. And I just also want to keep in people's minds that not everybody comes here just for the beaches. It's, walking through the trails, and there's the ponds, and there's the birding, and, kayaking is in the water, but it doesn't feel as, like you're swimming around. So I think that is kind of a fear factor.
Yeah.
And I think you heard me say this the other day, that she did once say that, there's a huge percentage of people who come and sit on the beach but never go in the water. Yeah. They're just not swimmers. So a lot of people are, that is, the temperature of the water has always been a deterrent anyway. So we have to just not be too hard on ourselves and, get scared, because I think we're bigger than we think in that regard of our beauty and
And
what attracts
I would
people.
agree with you that, but we just have to remind people of that.
But I do think that tapping into the Cape Cod Chamber.
I agree. Yeah.
I have two questions, or actually a question and a comment, I guess. My question is, can you give us some geography about the town part of the harbor that the town would have to be responsible for dredging, and what the federal responsibility is? And is it possible for the town to do the town part of the dredging, not touch the federal? That's the first thing. But I don't know if that's possible. But the second question is, I think you're absolutely right. The sharks are we can't advertise, come to Wellfleet, swim with sharks. It just doesn't have the same. And the water is warming. But I do think if we look into the future about, I guess following up what Sheila said, the way we can market our town, we have one thing that we hope will happen, which is the opening up of the Herring River, which will increase the possibility of kayaking and recreation and fishing and all that dramatically. And we should think about sort of putting forth Wellfleet not just as a beach, but as this larger recreational area. And the other is, as you alluded to, the extension of the bike path, and perhaps thinking into the future, we can develop bike lanes around, to the beaches and places like that, to sort of sell ourselves as a bike-friendly town. Because the fact of the matter is, right now, we're not a bike-friendly town, specifically for families. Yeah. So I think those are things we should think about in the future. We have to come to terms with the fact that I think the sharks are going to discourage some people from coming here, and we have to push other things. And that may mean spending money to make these other things more viable.
Agreed. If I can just respond to the one part that you asked, that I can remember that you asked. So as far as dredging, the way we have to dredge to get that sediment out is you use a clamshell dredge and you put it in a barge. And so the federal channel has to be done first so that we can access the rest of it, because the barge would just sit on land once it started to get full. So we're kind of being hostage to the federal channel because it has to be done first before the rest of it can be done.
One thing, and I hate to be a wet blanket, but before we get too carried away with selling ourselves and touting all our virtues and everything, the one thing that I have heard through the years that keeps people away from Cape Cod are other people. It's too crowded. There are too many people on the road, too many people everywhere, so I question the need to sell ourselves. We're sold.
I think there's a happy medium there. We don't want to be overwhelmed with people. But those people who have a home here and are able to rent their home during the summertime to help pay their mortgage and actually help continue to live here, I want to make sure that they're still able to do that our visitor population doesn't drop off too much to affect them. So.
I have a question that's a little closer to what you're trained as rather than about sharks. Municipal financing. When we're looking at big projects like the harbor dredging, and maybe perhaps extending the water system, or building affordable housing and so forth, is there a mechanism by which the town can issue its own bonding so that people who live here or love this place and want to invest in it and are looking for an investment vehicle, especially as some of us get older and we don't want to be in volatile investment vehicles, is there a way that the town can issue its own bonds that people can buy and invest in their own town to help fund the cost of these municipal projects?
I don't know of that having been done. I mean, I think that's a great idea that we could talk to our bond council about, because we would still set it up through them, and it would still have all the legal process of, maybe we did it through Cape Cod 5 Bank. So when we had a bond payment, we would send it to Cape Cod 5, and they would do the process of distributing it to all of the people that were purchasers of the bond. So it's something I could look into, because I look at it usually from the other way, and I go, well, maybe people will just want to donate. But you're giving them a little bit, more of a return. And that's, when I look at sometimes when people have mortgages and it's like, they're paying 5% on their mortgage. And, for those of us who have money in a savings account in a bank and we're getting less than 1%, there's kind of a disconnect there. Like, can't we make that better that everybody wins? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once upon a time, it was common, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Please use the microphones. Microphones, please.
I don't know if those of you at home watching can hear this or not, but we get a voice over the microphone that tells us deeply to use the microphone. So we do try. Everybody good? Thank you all for coming here. Thank you.